Welcome to the Feeling Loudly podcast, a show about the power and magic of emotion, explored through the lens of astrology, divination, and art. I'm your host, Jana. I'm an astrologer, a tarot reader, Akashic Records reader, poet, and witch, and I'm here to help you feel your feels. Happy Not Friday. Welcome to our feels episode. Today I'm recording this on Saturday because I was too sleepy last night and I had this spell of feels, actual feeling feels, and could not record the feels episode because of that. But I'm here today refreshed and I took a morning nap. Have you ever taken a morning nap? Morning naps are so good. It's like when you have to get up at a certain hour and you feel really tired and you don't want to get up, but then you have space a little bit later in the morning to take a nap and to get that extra hour or 20 minutes or whatever, 3 hours, fuck it. So I had one of those and it was just so good. And then I had coffee and yum. So let's get into our updates first and then we'll jump into our episode. This was going to be an AMA, but no one asked me questions this month, which I thought was funny considering it's Gemini season and I would suppose this might be like a big question month, but no. So as a reminder, maybe I'll do those every other month or something. If you do have a question that you want to ask, you can submit it in a multitude of ways. If you're listening on Spotify, you can go to the episode page in Spotify, just click through to the episode and you'll see a link. No, not a link. You'll see a little box where you can submit a question for a future episode. Anywhere else or in general, there's also a voice message link that you can click and you can send in a voice note for me asking a question. You're also welcome to submit a question on the contact form on my website. So that's feelingloudly.com/contact. And you can ask any kinds of questions. I would say go crazy. Maybe not too crazy, but I will just not answer it if I'm not comfortable answering it, but feel free to ask. It can be questions about me. It can be questions about astrology, divination, tarot, psychic stuff, spirituality. I don't know. What else do I know about? I have a background in marketing and writing. I'm a poet and a writer, so I enjoy talking about that stuff too. And if you have a personal question that you want to ask, like you want some advice on a tricky topic or something that's just coming up in life that you'd like a little insight on, I'm happy to pull a tarot card for you on the pod, and I can do so anonymously. So just let me know that you want it to be anonymous if you're submitting it with your name. Okay, what else? I have officially changed my Patreon tiers. So those prices and perks are up to date and you can go check those out, patreon.com/feelingloudly. As a reminder, there's the $4 podcast tier now where you can access our new and full moon readings, which used to appear on this podcast. You can also access weekly channeled messages. And I also occasionally answer patron questions that I get from people about astrology and tarot and stuff. And that grants you access to our private Discord channels that are for patrons only. So $4 a month, it's an easy way to support me and my work on an ongoing basis. If you are a regular listener and you feel like you get some good support out of this podcast, it's super appreciated. And if Patreon is not your thing and you're not into subscriptions, stuff like that, I also always have a little tip jar link that you can access through my link tree, and my Cash App's in there too, I believe. So you are welcome to send me a tip if you love this and want to throw a little love my way. I appreciate it. I got a random tip from someone, I don't even know who they are, but it's like the first time that's ever happened to me where I just randomly got like a tip out of nowhere. on Cash App and was like, holy shit, that's cool. How sweet. Um, yeah, I think, is that the last update? I also want to remind everyone that I will be shifting my services soon. So if you've been thinking about booking one of my existing readings, I would check those out. I'm thinking more and more that I'm probably going to shift those readings next month, maybe on the Cancer new moon, TBD, but it's the last month to like have one of those specific, more niche Akashic Records, astrology, etc. readings, because I'll be kind of radically transforming the way that I structure my readings going forward. Okay, I believe that is it. Let's get into our feel for this week. So, interestingly, before I pulled the card, I was just like tuning in, and my mind was shot back to this moment when I hosted our first 22 Days of Tarot challenge in 2023. And I remembered something that I said or posted, or like the way that I was behaving, which wasn't bad or like wrong in any way. But I suddenly had this memory of that, and I got this like ick feeling about myself because I was embarrassed by something that I had said. And then I pulled our card, and the card is criticism. And I was like, oh yeah, there we go. Often when I'm about to pull a card, I'll start tuning into its energy before I actually pull it, or I'll get like visuals of the card itself. And interestingly, that's the memory that I was having. I remembered talking about often in that challenge how I kept seeing the visuals or the symbols or the shapes of the card before I actually looked at the card or really knew anything about the imagery of the card that was coming, because I was totally unfamiliar with the deck that I was using. So all of the imagery was new. And I was going through a sort of like little psychic upgrade during that challenge in 2023, and kind of confirming a lot of my clairvoyant abilities. And so I was really excited. I was like getting very excited each time I got this boost, because I was like, oh my God, this is really coming online right now in a bigger way. And so in my daily reflections that I shared through that challenge, I would really frequently be like, and I saw this, and then it was on the card. And so that's what I was reflecting on this morning before pulling the criticism card. And I was like, oh, that was like egoic, or like that was like me being like braggy. And then I sat with it for a second and was like, no, that's actually just kind of this mean inner voice. What was happening is I was really excited, and I was sharing this excitement over something with people that I felt safe to share that with. And when I pulled the criticism card, it showed me that, it reminded me that like what this voice is telling you is not the truth here. It's just a part of you that desires to suppress yourself and to try to fit yourself into a tiny little space, and to make yourself quiet and to humble yourself because of a fear of judgment or a fear of rejection of some kind. And I'll go ahead and read the guidebook description for criticism so we can get a little deeper into it. Criticism is a voice from the past written into my skull, printed onto my ears, stuck in front of my eyes. It's a poison that runs in my blood. It's the words I tell myself in the dark, learned from another wounded soul who likes to point at all the things that they couldn't do right. And how true that criticism is often a habit that we learn from someone else, or from many people, or from a society as a whole. It's often this imprinted voice that lives on and continues to speak within us, and often feel very true because it may have been a voice that we were very sensitive to in the past. Like, I think the really common story is having a critical parent or a critical caregiver, or someone who was really formative in your early life, who is very critical of you or very critical of themselves, and then how that becomes this learned, embedded pattern within us that we continue to repeat pretty automatically and sometimes unconsciously. Speaking as a sixth house Pluto person, with Pluto forming a square to my moon, opposing my sun and Mercury, scoring my nodal axis, I can be very, very, very self-critical. Sixth house Plutos are known for this. It's a placement that can lead to a lot of self-flagellation, and one where your inner voice can be so unkind, so harsh, so punitive, that it's kind of like having this drill sergeant or like just a really mean spirit in the mind that can tear you apart. And this is a voice that I lived with and kind of just honestly didn't even notice for most of my life until I reached probably my 20s and started kind of paying attention and I guess understanding that there was like a voice in my head, period, and not just like experiencing that as truth. And so there was a level of awareness that I came into. And of course, that came from like learning about psychology and going to therapy and talking to other people about their inner critics and all of that stuff. But it really became this feeling of like, oh, this isn't me. This isn't just the world either. Like, this is something else. And that sort of distinction was super helpful for me. But at first, it was really painful because it brings up this immense grief sometimes to realize how unkind we can be to ourselves and maybe how unkind other people have been to us or the world has been to us. And that was a process I had to really go through, was like recognition and grieving of how deeply unkind my inner monologue was to me and how unkind my parents had been to me and, you know, my brothers at times and other people in my life who kind of contributed to the formation of that voice. And then backing out from there, looking at just how unkind society can be and how unkind, I wouldn't say this world, but like how unkind people can be. And that recognition comes with a lot of stuff because it's almost like, for me at least, it was almost this grief process of seeing, oh, things could have been different. That could have not been the experience. You're saying that there's an alternative to that, and how that sort of like loss of safe and affirmative love, like not knowing what that is really, can be so jolting. And our clarifying tarot card for criticism is the Ten of Cups. And so when I first saw this come out, it was like, this is community. It came out upside down, actually. It came out reversed, and that's telling. And I think that the Ten of Cups reversed is a more accurate representation of the energy of criticism and all this stuff that I'm talking about, where it's like a lot of disharmony and dysfunction and pain and sometimes the loss of joy or the loss of fulfillment or never having had that period. Whereas the Ten of Cups upright is one of the most gorgeous and fulfilling and abundant energies in the tarot, that is about joyful relationships and reciprocity and feeling truly held, seen, loved, supported by the communities that you're a part of, and feeling like you can offer that in kind. And so criticism is sort of like this severing force. And interestingly, now that I'm actually going through my mind, I was thinking about this exact thing on my morning walk this morning. I was thinking about how I, at many times in many relationships in my life, have used criticism to distance myself from other people and to kind of like puncture the vastness and the sort of purity of love that I felt for someone, I would poke holes in that with criticism. I would find reasons to judge them, reasons to push them away. And it would often be really shallow stuff or really like superficial stuff that I would kind of cling to because I guess in retrospect, I didn't know it then, but in retrospect, I think that that was a means to not feel so vulnerable in that love. Criticism really distances us from each other. It really says there is something wrong with you that I have deemed unacceptable. And so I have to push you away. I have to like create this space of division and pain. And I have to hurt you in a way so that you don't come closer toward me. And it's interesting that I think like so many people I know at least have had experiences of having very critical mothers. And it's like kind of this like trope at this point. Like it's so common and it's so widely talked about how I'd say often, especially like AFAB people and women who've had complicated relationships with their moms because their moms were extremely critical and judgmental of them. And of course, it can apply to anyone. Gender doesn't really matter, but it's a common story that women often talk about in particular is like, oh, my mom is so critical of me. And often that's, I think, the product of mothers who are deeply critical of themselves, and then they see their child as a sort of projection of themselves, and they criticize the qualities and the characteristics and the behaviors in their child that they can't stand within themselves. And it creates this incredible pain. But it's not the creation, actually. It's just sort of like the legacy that gets passed down from one generation to the other. Here's the stuff within me that I can't stand, and I have to kill it within you in order to feel safe. Here's the stuff within me that I can't look at and I can't accept. I have to judge and ridicule it within you so that I feel better about how it lives within me. And of course, that doesn't work. It's not the tool that helps us achieve growth and healing and self-compassion. It does the opposite. It can become like carcinogenic in ourselves and in our relationships. But I do often think of criticism as like the puncture. It's like the puncture wound in the balloon of love or in the balloon of care that ends up over time kind of bringing the ship down if you're not careful and if you don't correct for it. And our song today really beautifully illustrates that sort of corrosive effect. And I'm going to go ahead and read the lyrics. So the song is Coming Alive by To Another. I can feel your love some mornings, feel the empty sheets, and it comes on without warning like the air I breathe. And I must have done something wrong. Had love my whole damn life. Am I in need of something from you? I'm on a road to your perfection. I don't need correction. Am I in need of something from you? Please don't try and shake me. I've been so patient lately. I'm just everything you wanted me to be. Every now and then I smell a fire burning. It's like the earth ain't turning. I'm just everything you wanted me to be. Now I'm just coming alive. Baby, I'm coming alive. I can feel the eyes around me, kill the buzz I need. But I feel the will surround me. No, I won't concede. And I must have done something wrong, kept you round for way too long. Am I in need of something from you? I'm on a road to my perfection. I don't need correction. Am I in need of something from you? So there's this repetition of the idea of correction and perfection and needing something from someone else. They repeat like, I must have done something wrong. And it feels like this person is being rejected and judged and criticized by the person that they're speaking to. And they're trying to like reach toward this idea of perfection in this other person's eyes in order to receive love. But they're at the same time questioning that. Like, you know, they say am I in need of something from you? Like, I don't need correction. And so it feels like there's this inner battle that's going on within them where at once they're like seeking that sort of acceptance and that sort of appreciation and love and compassion from someone, to be seen by someone. But at the same time, there's also this instinct and this felt need to change themselves in order to receive that. So when I brought up the example of how I thought about this on my walk this morning, how I was thinking about how my own sort of like I can pull in these like shallow judgments at times in order to distance myself. Those can often be really superficial things that are superficial because they're really not rooted in like the truth. And the way that this manifested this morning is I was walking around and I was thinking about someone who I recently lost, and this has been super painful, like really painful for me. And it was one of those just sort of like almost like it felt senseless, and where it's hard to grapple with it, and the loss can feel so acute at times that when I read the opening lyrics of this song, like I can feel your love some morning, feel the empty sheets, and it comes on without warning, like the air I breathe. And that has been the experience, is just like surges of emotion, feelings of loss and grief, and so intense that I've had to like wear sunglasses around like all the time, because I'll feel fine, I'll feel okay, and then it'll just come on without warning, and I'll feel that just upwelling of pain and like crying out while I'm going on walks in the middle of a sunny day. And anyway, so I have these big like funeral-esque sunglasses on because it kind of feels like that. It kind of feels like grieving a death. And I noticed myself going into critical mode, criticizing that person and trying to find flaws in them as a means to feel better about losing them. And it was sort of like a, well, maybe I don't even like them anyway, or maybe like my image of them is so flawed, or was so flawed anyway, or so inaccurate, I should say. And maybe like if I actually got to know them, I wouldn't like them at all. And I did actually know them, but like if I really deeply got to know this person, maybe I wouldn't even like them at all. And that felt safe. It felt really safe to go into that sort of critical mindset, because it interrupted the pattern of grief and it interrupted the pattern of love. And I think that's something that we can do preemptively at times when we're afraid of losing someone too. Like we might find flaws within people that we don't like, or we might cast judgment upon people who we really love or care about, because it feels like a defense mechanism to keep us from immersing ourselves in the state of love, and to keep us from feeling the acuteness of pain if we do end up losing them. Because then we have this data to fall back on that's like, well, look at that thing, and look at that thing, and look at that like terrible or annoying or infuriating or problematic or toxic trait within this person. And gripping hold of that and focusing in on those characteristics might make it feel temporarily easier to lose someone. If you're a person who's familiar with codependency and like all of the symptoms and all of the, not all of, but at least some of the like behaviors surrounding codependency, which is a term that I try to carry with a very loose grip because I have some issues with it. But one of the common expressions of codependency is criticism and control. It's very common for people who ID as codependent to be really controlling and critical of their partners, and to kind of like try to mold them into something or try to fix them or heal them, and to see people and to see relationships as these sites of work where we're meant to fix someone up or get them to be something that we can see, like seeing someone's potential and then trying to kind of like force that into being in a way. And it's something that I have absolutely done. I used to do this a lot in my relationships, and I had to come to terms with that in my last serious relationship, that I really did constantly focus in on my partner's potential and did not see the person who was in front of me. And there are a lot of astrological reasons for that too. Interestingly, like Venus in Pisces is an exalted Venus, and it's complicated. This is my natal placement, and it's complex because like essential dignity and exaltation and fall and domicile, and like it's not black and white. Venus in Pisces, I was talking to Amanda Moreno about this the other day because we have Venus at the same degree. And we were talking about the sort of like woes of Venus in Pisces and how this, for me actually, and this could be like a data issue because I know quite a few Venus in Pisces people, but they are among the people I know who've had some of the most seemingly difficult times with love and romance specifically. And part of that is because of that buoyant nature of Pisces and Venus's ability in Pisces to see the best in people and to see the potential and to see the incredible beauty, sort of like surreal, transportative, otherworldly beauty in a person and in a connection that can lead one away from themselves. It can cause you to abandon yourself. It can cause you to stay stuck in the fantasy of what could be instead of sticking to what is real. It can cause you to unconditionally love someone into your downfall. Like continuing to forgive, continuing to accept, continuing to offer compassion and love and forgiveness, and even to make excuses or enable people. And it can be very, very hard to get out of because part of that sort of exaltation bind is that these are things that are often encouraged. Like it's really seen as a beautiful trait. I would say probably most people consider it a beautiful trait to be compassionate or to, offer unconditional love to people and to be able to like access that sort of Christ consciousness. And Christ consciousness is something I associate with Pisces. And I'm looking at the 10 of Cups, which is a Mars in Pisces card. And I also have Mars in Pisces. And this for me has been a tricky one because it is so easy for me to see someone else's side of the story or to forgive someone and imagine that even if their actions were harmful, their intentions were good or their intentions were coming from a place of love, or oh my God, I can go through the catalog of someone's childhood trauma and adulthood trauma and all of the circumstances and all of the possibilities and all of the reasons why they may have hurt me. And that can send me into a tailspin where I end up staying stuck in place because I can offer so much grace to someone for the way that they might behave. And this is an issue that I encountered in this relationship I was talking about, where like I was really, really hurt and treated poorly, but I kept swinging between these states of like total compassion and then like total criticism. And it was hard for me to kind of find the middle ground for a while where I was like, okay, I can offer grace without throwing myself under the bus. I can offer compassion and understanding without like putting myself in a position to be harmed all over again. I can see this person as a human and see them through the eyes of love without destroying myself in the process. But that's not something I've always had the capability of doing. Like in the past, for me, love meant sacrificing myself. It meant sacrificing my happiness and my well-being for someone else. And that's where we see kind of like the codependent expression of Pisces placements. And this can be Neptunian. It can be, I mean, there's any sign in the zodiac can operate in ways that are more maladaptive when it comes to relationships and overgiving and all of that stuff. But there are definitely signs that are more predisposed to it. And Pisces, Libra, we could say like Cancer, potentially. Who else is in there? Virgo, maybe, although Virgo's usually better at boundaries. And again, like it all depends on everything. But there's definitely an aptitude that some of us have for this type of loving that can set us up for a lot of pain, and where we have to kind of bring it into balance. And so criticism at times, now thinking of it, might feel like an antidote to that sometimes. Like, let's look over to the opposite of Pisces Venus, which is Virgo Venus. And that's a Venus that is technically in fall. And Virgo Venuses are often known for being more critical. And they can certainly be more critical, and sort of like I'm gonna sort you out type of love. Like they can be very caring, like extremely generous and caring in terms of how they tend to the ones that they love and kind of see to it that like they have what they need, and they are warm and fed and like, you know, have the right chapstick and like there's this very attentive, detail-oriented quality to the way that Virgo Venus might love, whereas Pisces Venus is more like expansive and encompassing and sort of like this holistic, I see you and I accept you kind of love. The Virgo Venus expression might be, I see how I can help you, or I see where you need support and I can fill in those gaps. And so it's more specific, more niche, more like targeted. And that can be beautiful. And if it turns into more of the like quality of criticism and picking someone apart and seeing all their flaws, it can fall into that very shadowy territory of extreme criticism. One of my exes, his mom was a Virgo moon and Venus, and she was one of the most critical parents I've ever met. And it was really hard to witness. It was really, really hard to experience because I could feel the pain that it was causing, and I could feel how old that was. And I had to sort of hold at the same time, like, I know deep down that she loves her child. I know that she is trying to love in the way that she knows how, and is probably loving in the way that she was loved. And I know that this isn't evil. I know that this isn't like, the intention is not that, but oh my God, how heartbreaking to be picked apart in that way by the person, one of the people who's ideally gonna like love all of you, And again, that unfortunately is just not the case for a lot of people. A lot of us learn to tear ourselves apart from the people who first tore us apart, and from our parents, from our caregivers, from our peers. And that was definitely the case with that dynamic. Was like, wow, it was just endless criticism. And the children, like, you know, my ex and his sibling, like, they kind of, like, you know, laughed it off, and it was just normal for them. But from an outside perspective, it was so hard to witness. And I knew that her inner monologue had to be so painful if that's how her words were coming out at the people that she loved the most, her family. And I also saw how there was such a lack of intimacy in these relationships, because intimacy and criticism are very paradoxical. It's very difficult to maintain intimacy when there's a lot of criticism. It's very difficult to maintain a sense of closeness and emotional safety when there's a lot of criticism, because you can't open up these soft parts of yourself safely if there's a dagger that's waiting for you when you do. You can't open up your heart to someone safely when they're ready to pierce it by telling you that you're fundamentally wrong. And so it prohibits intimacy, and for a lot of us becomes, again, this like mechanism to keep ourselves distant from people who we might otherwise feel too vulnerable around. So I share all of this, I guess, with the hopes that, like, if you're someone who either has experienced a lot of criticism or can be very critical, maybe both, a lot of the times it's both for us, that was definitely both for me, to try to be compassionate to yourself first. Because thinking about that sort of axis again, like the Virgo Pisces axis, and I want to be clear that I'm not suggesting that Virgo placements or all Virgo people are just like critics. Like, there is definitely a propensity toward that behavior. And it's, you know, a sort of stereotypical quality of Virgo placements, but the ultimate intention with Virgo is often to help. And so sometimes that gets, again, expressed in a critical way. It shows up as criticism. But that's not to say that Virgo people are unloving or mean or whatever. But when we're thinking about Venus can have a harder time in Virgo because not many people feel super loved by being picked apart in the way that Virgo Venus can at times pick people apart. And on the other hand, many people feel extremely loved and cared for by acts of service and attentiveness and the desire to relieve someone of burdens and the desire to show up in a very like nuanced, thoughtful, and service-oriented way, which are all beautiful qualities of Virgo Venus. And like Virgo Venus can love gorgeously and can see so much of someone and understand and attune to their needs and attune to their desires. And in that way, it can take on that sort of self-sacrificial, service-oriented, like, I'm going to do so much for you that I almost lose myself in the process. And that's where the Pisces-Virgo axis is like very much mirroring one another, because Pisces can do that in a sort of polar way, where it's like the Pisces-Venus can see the best, can see the best in someone, which can be harmful too, right? Because that might be an expectation that we feel we can never live up to. Like, I've been told by partners in the past, like, I feel like I'm never going to be enough for you. And I didn't understand that, because I was like, what do you mean? I love you. Like, what do you mean? And I realized in retrospect that at times, I think because I saw I put them on a pedestal or I saw them in this glowing light, they felt that I saw them in this like fake glow that they could never live up to. And that if they were to err, if they were to step out of line, that they felt they might lose my love. And so it's like this perfection focus that just operates in different ways between these two signs, but there's this shared quality between them often where being the recipient of that kind of love can make you feel unseen. And it can make you feel like you need to be perfect in order to receive that love. Or you need to be you need to be a hero, you need to be a savior, you need to be whatever. And so it's just something to think about. And I don't know, I think it's interesting that the astrology is coming in so hard for this episode, which isn't usually the case. But yeah, I leave you with that. And I guess I hope that the medicine of compassion and of like recognizing the mirroring effect within us, that often when we're criticizing other people, it's something that we're very fearful of within ourselves. And the idea that there's a fear of intimacy that might inspire criticism. So the next time you feel compelled to criticize someone you really care about, maybe ask yourself if you're afraid of getting closer to them or if you're afraid of losing them. And could that be kind of turned around and flipped on its head so that in that moment when you feel that desire to pick someone apart, to tear someone apart, you could actually reflect and be like, maybe I really love them. And maybe the expression of that right now is wanting to come out in a way that's not super kind, or in a way that's maybe not even true. Like sometimes we criticize shit and we don't even mean it. We're just trying to push someone away because it feels scary to pull them in closer. All right, y'all. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy the pod, I really appreciate your reviews. You can rate me on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. On Spotify, it's kind of weird. I think you have to click like a little gear icon at the top of the podcast page in order to add a review. You can add star ratings there, and you can leave comments on Apple, and I'm sure on the other platforms too. And heads up that I will be moving off of Anchor, Spotify for podcasters, because they're shutting down their podcast operations. So there might be some like lags or like shifts and technical difficulties in the weeks to come as I make that transition. And I think that is all. Thank you for being here. Love to you.